to BlockStars, an interview series featuring superstars in the private investment space to inspire and educate. I'm so happy this week to invite Keith Bank. He's the CEO and co-founder of KB Partners in Chicago. It's a venture capital firm focused on angel and early stage investment opportunities across a broad range of industries, with a particular specialty at the intersection of sports and technology. He also happens to be a golf fanatic. So for those of you who hit the links, Keith's a good guy to know. Welcome, Keith. How are you today?
I'm great. Great to be here. Nice to be on the show.
Yeah. So let's get started. Your background. Tell our listeners a little bit about you, what inspired you to get into the industry, and any other fun tidbits that we might want to know.
Sure. So kind of born and raised in St. Louis, grew up avid Cardinal, Blues fan, all the football teams that have moved out of St. Louis, and went to University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School of Business undergrad, got out of school, took a job in corporate America and lasted a whopping 3 months and quit and decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I moved back to St. Louis, started a company that I sold, and then came to Chicago to go to business school at Kellogg at Northwestern. Out of business school, I took a job and spent about 10 years as a commercial real estate developer, ended up as a partner at a fairly significant firm in Chicago. But the whole time I was always doing small entrepreneurial projects and side things, including producing a feature film and dabbling in a few odds and ends. And literally one day I walked into my real estate partners and said, I'm leaving. And they said, why? I said, I'm going to start a venture capital firm. And they said, what do you know about venture capital? I said, not much, but I'll figure it out. It can't be that complicated. And that was 1996. And I've been doing it ever since. First, as a glorified angel investor, for lack of a better term, did a series of one-off deals with my own money and some folks who trusted and believed in me, had some good early success, and then ended up raising 2 early stage, purely tech-focused venture funds, investing in internet products and services, computer hardware and software, medical devices, industrial technology. That was the good news. The bad news, they were vintage kind of 98, 99, 2000, kind of the worst years in venture capital after the internet implosion, and actually did pretty well on a relative basis, but nothing to write home about on an absolute basis. After those 2 funds were fully invested and harvested, I went back to my angel investing roots and did a series of one-off deals, again, with my own money and some folks who trusted and believed in me. I'd source the deals, find the deals, do the diligence, take the board seat, usually write the biggest check and syndicate out the rest, and had a really good run across 18 companies. We returned 6x collectively, and across the sports-related deals we returned about 29x. And I said, well, 29x, that's not bad. Maybe there's something here. And I was super passionate about sports. I grew up an athlete, playing sports, following sports. And when I started to look at the sports tech investing landscape, and this was kind of circa 2016, 2017, a lot of tailwinds were starting to develop, the potential legalization of sports betting, the emergence of esports, all of the crazy rights fees these media companies were paying for live sports, and their needs to figure out ways to pay back those rights fees through fan engagement platforms, fantasy, sports betting, other areas. And I decided to get back into the venture fund business, but with the thesis of investing strictly at the intersection of sports and tech. About the only people playing in the space at the time, or a few athletes were dabbling, a few team owners were dabbling, but nobody really doing it in a thoughtful, quasi-professional manner. So recruited a team. We raised a small-ish first fund of $41 million. It's fully invested in 17 companies. We've had a few exits to date. And then in 2021, we set out to raise fund 2 with a $100 million target and ended up raising about $127 million. As of today, we've made 13 investments and expect to have around 30 by the time we're done. And so that's kind of a quick and dirty of my career. I'm sure I missed a few twists and turns along the way, but I've always zigged and zagged and like to challenge myself to find interesting new avenues and meet interesting new people.
Well, I love that. If you're talking about getting into the investment space between sports and technology, how did you approach that? You obviously had a passion for sports, right? I don't know how much you knew about technology and how you were involved in that. I know some of your early investments were involved in that, but how do you break into that? How do you find the right people and the right organizations?
So I had been a tech investor really for close to 2 decades, and occasionally would do a sports deal along the way or see a sports deal, but most of them we typically would shy away from because we told our investors, we were going to invest in, internet products and services and computer hardware. So sports deal, that really doesn't fit in what we're doing. And now we're the opposite. Tons of people send us plans that have nothing to do with sports, and we have to say, sorry, we're only investing in sports. But, I think when you're passionate about something, the spoils usually follow. I had built a pretty good network in sports from my playing days, from, meeting people in and around the landscape. But I've always been a pretty good cold caller. And when I decided to raise the first fund in sports tech, I said, I want to raise a fund, but I want to surround myself with some really smart people and some good people. And so I recruited an advisory board of folks that were not just there for eyewash in a deck or on a website. They all were required to be investors in the fund and be willing to give us a commitment of time. And in exchange for that, they got a small piece of the carry in the fund. And I think once you start to, reach out to people and you have a compelling story and you get the first one or two, then it snowballs. And our current fund, we actually have 17 advisory board members, which is a ton of people, but they all come from areas that we want to. So we have one of the top sports betting experts in the country, and we have former NFL team owners, and we have presidents of golf companies, and we have sports agents and all kinds of different people that are highly useful to us in the types of businesses that we pursue. So a lot of it is just cold calling and persistence, quite honestly. I think of our advisory board members, maybe 2 or 3 I had known before. The rest were pretty much cold calls or networking. Someone introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone. And, I've just always found that if you're not afraid to take no for an answer, or if you're willing to extend yourself, most people will talk to you and give you the time of day.
That's great. A couple questions for you more on a personal level. What sports did you play? I grew up in St. Louis as well, so I used to play ice hockey, but
I was a football, basketball, baseball player, but I was the guy who was always injured. I ripped up my knee freshman year in high school playing football, which kind of hurt me, and then ripped it up 4 more times playing basketball. So, I'd play half a season and then rip up my knee again and miss the last half of the season. So always loved sports. I was a 10-hour a day, play basketball till you can't stand anymore in the summertime. And that was my real passion, but loved all sports, played all sports other than really hockey. I never played hockey, roller hockey, street hockey, but never ice hockey, but, couldn't get enough of it. Knew all the statistics, every player's batting average, every player's scoring average in basketball, and really just followed it. And it was just a passion. I don't know how my parents weren't into sports at all, and I don't know how I acquired it, but it just became something super important in my whole life.
I like it. When you tell me that you're a Cardinals fan and a Blues fan, I'm gravitating towards you. My guess is that one of your advisors is probably not Stan Kroenke, though.
No, he's not.
No, he's not. He's not a favorite guy around St. Louis. Okay, so you actually have a really interesting story about, how you sort of broke into this industry. And now I need to know, let's say somebody's brand new in the industry and they want to get involved in, let's say, something like sports or any sort of industry. What were some of those cold calling questions that, you went in there obviously very earnest, very eager? Do you remember any of the things that you said to some of those folks, like when you were first pitching this idea for your agency, your firm?
I really talked about my passion for what we were doing, B, that there really was not much of a competitive landscape, and we would be really early in. And I remember some of the lines I would use. The only real technology in sports prior to more recent years was the yellow first down line in football. That was the definition of sports tech. And today, the things people are investing in, no one had ever even heard the term NIL or NFT or Web3 or so many of these things are new, and in sports so much has evolved, the realignments in college sports and the transfer portal and all these things. So it's a constantly evolving space, and streaming media has just changed the entire landscape, how people consume their content and their sports. And so I just told people, look, I think it's the Wild West. I think there's going to be a ton of opportunity. I think the players that come in early are going to see some really interesting opportunities. And, it proved to be more than, now there's probably 10-ish firms that are kind of doing things similar to us. And I think there's room for another 10 or 20 more. We see 3,000 deals a year. It's kind of crazy. We meet with probably 300 companies, get into serious diligence on 25 or 30 and make 6, 7, 8 investments a year. So it is a big funnel, a big weeding out process, but a lot of things keep me awake at night, but deal flow is not one of them. We have more than we can really review and do justice to.
I love that. So obviously you broke into a really innovative and progressive section of the industry, that intersection of sports and technology. So what would you say are some of the most exciting or like transformative aspects of your work?
I think this whole sports betting landscape is really interesting. In the early days, it was more about who is going to enter the space and how long it's going to take them to get their licenses and which states are going to pass, the gambling laws to allow people to function there. Now, most of the U.S., other than a couple of quite large states, have passed legislation, and a lot of the betting companies have now moved from, paying these big premiums to get customers, $1,000 free bet or $500 free bet. And really, if you took the skins off all their apps, that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between FanDuel and DraftKings and BetMGM and Caesars. They're all kind of alike. So now the challenge is, how are they going to differentiate themselves from the others? Are they going to offer more interesting products and features? In the last year, these same game parlays have gotten really popular, but they're all using pretty antiquated tech stacks. And now they're starting to have to focus on, how can we deliver a better user experience, more compelling product? You've probably heard the term micro wagering. We have a lot of investments in that space around taking the latency out of streaming and allowing people to bet on, is the next pitch a ball or a strike? Is the next player runner or pass? Is this guy going to make the free throw? Is this guy going to make the putt? That's going to dominate the sports betting landscape, in the next 5 years or so. Right now, it's a tiny fraction because there are issues with getting content in real time at scale. And one of our investments is in a company called Phoenix Real Time Solutions that, has solved this latency problem and synchronization problem and scale problem. And we think that's going to be a big home run for us. We're way ahead of the pack from a technology perspective, and it's kind of where the market is going. So, we try to see around corners and get a little bit ahead of trends. And in the case of that company, we were several years too early, but now the hockey stick is starting, and we're pretty excited about it.
That sounds awesome. It almost sounds like AI would be involved in something like that. And I could see AI transforming a lot in this space as well. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome? I'm sure that there's been a lot of shifts in the industry, things that you're talking about that they're changing right now. So what are some of those big challenges that you've overcome?
I think challenges in the venture world, it's a very cyclical business. Right now, we happen to be in a very down time where, IPOs have almost grounded to a halt, very few exits, valuations have come way down, but for the 10 years prior to the last 18 months, the upper hand was with the entrepreneurs. They had 10 people wanting to invest in their company. They could command silly valuations. And we are really good at sticking to our discipline. We think a lot of that stuff that was going on over that period of time was irrational exuberance and people getting a little bit out ahead of their skis and paying silly prices for things, thinking people were going to pay 2 or 3 times that down the road and the music was going to keep playing. The music has kind of stopped playing right now, and I think the market is back to where it should be in normalcy, where reasonable deals are getting done at reasonable prices. And I'm sure a couple of years from now everybody will forget about this and things will be going crazy on a positive basis again, but people have short memories. I've been doing this long enough to have lived through several really bad down cycles in the market. And some of the younger people that have come into the industry, haven't lived through that and don't really know what that feels like. So we try to stay disciplined in ownership stakes we want to take in companies, in pre-money valuations, terms we get. And we always like to have, it's got to be a win-win. If the entrepreneurs feel like they've been taken advantage of, that's no good. And if we feel like we've been taken, it's got to be, if the company turns into a huge success, everyone makes a lot of money, is successful and shares in the spoils. And, some people have that same attitude and others don't. Some people go for the jugular, whether it's on the entrepreneur side or the investor side. We just think it's, the entrepreneurs that you back, you're going to be with for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, probably spend as much time with them in many cases as you might with your family and friends. So it's a personal relationship, much more than a business relationship. And you got to learn how to coexist together like you do in a marriage or anything else. And so I think it's really important to establish, relationships with the founding teams and the management teams. And it's challenging because it's interpersonal relations, it's styles, it's one of the things we spend a lot of time on when we evaluate our founding teams is not just experience on a resume and a bio. It's, are they coachable? Do they have a cast iron stomach? Can they pivot when things aren't going well? Do they have the charisma to attract and maintain talent? All those kinds of soft skills, which really don't show through on a LinkedIn profile or, on a resume. And it, we make our share of mistakes. But, in my career, I think most of my biggest wins have been about who I've backed, and most of my biggest mistakes have been about who I've backed.
What would you define as a successful deal, money aside?
It's hard to say money side. We take money from limited partners who have invested with us and are expecting to get, good solid returns. And I'm actually the largest investor in both of our funds. So I've got a lot of my own personal money invested as well and would like to make good returns. So I think a great result is when you end up with a successful deal and both sides can walk away saying this was a great 4-year ride, 5-year ride, 6-year ride, whatever it was. And both sides ended up with what they wanted monetarily, but also learnings and experience and relationships, and all that stuff's important. This is a people business, and I think every business is a people business, but in particular, this is kind of an in the trenches with people fighting through some really hard times and concepts and principles. And we invest really early, unlike some other venture and PE funds. We're usually the first institutional money in. We're investing when they have 0 to maybe $1 million or $2 million of revenue, 5 to 10 employees. So it's a lot of hard work to build a company from that to hopefully $100 million or more in revenue business. And so a lot of blood, sweat, and tears goes into it.
No question. So how do you stay motivated and continue to grow as you're experiencing these?
So I'm constantly amazed at the ingenuity of entrepreneurs and people that, risk a lot to follow their dream. And I'm amazed at how many of those people are out there. I mean, during the course of this call with you, I'll probably get 15 to 20 new business plans in my inbox. And that happens day after day, week after week, month after month. And it just never ceases to amaze me how creative and risk-taking and smart people that are out there. So that's what keeps me. I love meeting smart young people who are trying to make their mark in the world. And some are super crazy passionate, and we meet with them and we think their idea has little or no merit. And, but you still got to love their passion and their belief that's going to work. And then other people are more soft sell, and you see, wow, this thing could be massive. So, dealing not just with people, but with styles of, management styles, personality styles, personal traits. It's just, this is a pattern recognition business. And I think the successful investors are the ones that can figure out what good looks like, what right looks like. And it's way more of an art than a science. People that try to blend it down to a science and metrics, I think, are missing the boat. I really think the good investors have good instincts about markets, timing, people, and the not so good investors do things by the book.
That makes sense. Pattern recognition is huge in just about any industry. And so as you're mentioning that, what are some of the trends or developments that listeners should be aware of?
Well, you can't hardly open up anything without hearing about AI and how it's going to, rule the world and run the world. We have AI use cases in several of our companies. We haven't backed what I would consider a pure AI company to date, but many, again, that use artificial intelligence as part of their products or software platform. So that's obviously a really interesting space. Again, as I talked about earlier, I think this whole kind of video streaming world and content delivery and how that is all evolving. The younger generation is consuming sports and content totally differently than you and I might have. Can't sit through a whole game, want their information in very quick bites and want to be doing 7 things at the same time. We have another company, StreamLayer, that has created a video overlay technology that enables a user to watch an event or a game and with a see-through layer that enables them, without leaving that viewing experience, to buy tickets to a future game, place a bet, call up a group watch party, have all their social media feeds, have a multi-camera experience where they watch different angles. So, I think that's where the world is going to, ways that it's good in some ways and it's bad in some ways. I would argue that I like to sit and watch a game from start to finish and
Mm.
focus on that, as opposed to be doing 20 things at the same time. But you got to go, as Gretzky said, you got to follow the puck, I guess.
Yeah, go where the puck's going, not where it goes right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally get that. Hey, anytime you're using the great one as an example, I'm going to follow you right there, Keith. So with that in mind, like, are there any books, resources, any sort of practices that have had a profound impact on your career, the field that you're working within?
Maybe a little corny, but probably the biggest single impact on what I do, why I do, how I do, was John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach at UCLA.
Hmm.
I read all his books when I was in junior high and high school. I used to carry around a folded sheet in my wallet with his pyramid of success that laid out all the attributes that go into being a success, whether it be in sports or in life. And I still remember a ton of his sayings. And my kids are probably tired of me saying the sayings to them and repeating them. But I kind of live my life. And probably my favorite one of his was, things turn out best for those who make the best of the way things turn out. And I've just always been a kind of big follower of that and a big believer in that. And just a lot of his other teachings have stayed with me for a very, very long time.
Makes total sense. Obviously a legend, and his legend continues to live on. I still see posts about him all the time on LinkedIn and in my Facebook feed. What advice would you give to somebody that's just starting out in the industry?
I'm a big passion guy. Like, follow your passion. Not because out of undergraduate and graduate school, I took the two lowest paying jobs I was offered, not because they were the lowest, because it's what I thought I wanted to do at the time. And I've always kind of, again, taught my kids, and a lot of people come to me for mentoring, or we have a ton of interns that come through our place. And I'm always like, do what you want to do and get you excited to get up every day. If you're doing something you love, the financial spoils will eventually follow, because you'll be wildly successful and it's not going to feel like work. And if you hate going to work every day, you're probably unlikely to ever be very successful, because you're going to rue being there and wishing you were somewhere else, and your mind's going to drift and everything else. So I'm a big believer in following your passion, take risk. My attitude when I was younger, when I didn't have anything, was like, if I lose everything I have, it's not anything. So, I'm back where I am. I can always go get a job somewhere. And not everybody has that mentality and attitude. And there are a lot of people that just want to, go the corporate route, and that's fine, but kind of know who you are and know what makes you tick. And so I just can't emphasize enough, like, follow your passion and don't give up. Like, one of the other things that I believe very strongly in, that pretty much anybody that reaches out to me gets a response from me, even if it's a polite, thanks very much, this isn't a great fit for us, or if I can ever be helpful, let me know. And it takes a lot of time, getting thousands of emails a day and trying to stay on top of them and trying to be responsive. But it just always bugged me when I was the young person looking to break in somewhere and would send it. Back in the day, it wasn't emails, because email wasn't invented. It was a cover letter and a resume, and no one would respond. And the few that would respond, you would be so like, wow, thank you so much, it feels so good. And I get notes like that, dozens of them a month, from people. Wow, you're the only person that responded to my business plan. You're the only person that, took the time. I appreciate it. So I just live by the golden rule. Try to treat people the way you want to be treated yourself. And again, I think that not because you're going to get anything out of it necessarily, but I think your reputation is all you have. And if people think well of you, it's going to spread, and hopefully, good things will come your way.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Any mistakes that you made that turned out to be a valuable lesson?
Yeah, look, anyone who says they haven't made mistakes along the way, I think would not be telling the truth. I think the biggest mistakes have mostly been about people, either falling in love with a person or actually falling in love with a deal. And it's in this industry, it's really easy to fall in love. And a few times in the past, I've been guilty of falling in love with the technology that was so spectacular, so game changing, so differentiated, but didn't really spend enough time thinking about the who was that was they might be a great inventor, they might be a great technologist, but could they take this idea or product or service to market and build a successful company and have the fortitude to allow someone else to come in and help them get there. And so they, made two pretty big bets early in my career on deep technology plays, both which had, unbelievable stories. I thought we were going to make 50 times our money and everything. And, one was almost a zero, and the other one we got, I think, 80 cents in the dollar back. And, sweated blood over these things for half a decade, and
Hmm.
raised a lot of money, put in a lot of money, and both were the same thing. At the end of the day, they weren't the right people that were behind this. And so this business, you can't fall in love. It's dangerous. And also really get to know the people. One other instance, we backed an entrepreneur that on the surface was amazing and looked great, turned out to be a raging alcoholic as we got into the deal. And we had to, replace that person and brought in someone great. And that company turned into be a, rousing success, and took it public, and it was a home run. But it was all about the person. The technology didn't change, the story didn't change, just the person changed.
Yeah, you had indicated earlier some qualities that you look for in a person, like coachability, approachability. Any other sort of characteristics that really just stand out to you? It could be a list, or based on
This is
stories.
probably a little trite and formulaic, but I think in the industry that we're in the sports industry, I think people that were former competitive athletes tend to have that drive, that discipline, that mindset. It's not to say that people aren't athletes can't have the same thing, because they absolutely can. But I think particularly in this sports tech space, and even on our team, pretty much everybody on our team were former athletes, some very elite level athletes, others just, super strong recreational athletes. But I just think folks that have dedicated themselves to a discipline, a sport, whether through training or learning, whatever, just bring something to the table that not everybody has. So, and I don't know if it's a bias, because that's who I am and that's the way I was wired. And you know what you like and you like what you know. But I found a lot of folks in the business world in general that were former athletes have turned into successes probably more than the general population.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Those are people that, they almost don't have a threshold. A lot of times they want to just keep pushing themselves. They run up that mountain and then they're looking for that next mountain. Absolutely, get that. How do you feel that your work will positively impact the industry or society as a whole?
I think in a couple of ways. I think that, over the years, mentored an awful lot of people, awful lot of young people who have gone on, whether they've been interns or employees or investors or whatever, that have gone on to do great things, which is always super gratifying. I think just being able to provide capital and knowledge and expertise to young entrepreneurs that go on to be very successful, not just in business, but in life, is very, very gratifying. I think that, the entrepreneurial economy is so much bigger than most people recognize, whether it's, someone who owns a, brick and mortar retail store or a manufacturing company or a tech company. It doesn't matter. Our whole, society is really built on, entrepreneurship and people who have taken the risk to start a company and build a company and grow a company. So I find that very exciting and appealing to me, and, a legacy to leave. And, one other thing that has nothing to do with business that I'm very proud of, and it's affected, I think, quite a few people. I started a charity golf tournament 28 years ago called the Chicago Select Golf Invitational. I walked in the door of the American Cancer Society in Chicago and said, I want to help you raise some money for a disease that's horrific and has affected so many people, and I'd like to do my little part. And they kind of said, yeah, right. And I said, well, give me a shot, and started this event that in our first year we netted 90,000, and this past year we netted $1.3 million. We've raised close to $20 million in 28 years of this event. We've affected it. All the money goes to cancer research. We've helped an awful lot of people that have suffered from this terrible disease, and to have one event be around for 28 years and still going stronger than ever is a great legacy. So I chaired it for about the first 14, 15 years, and then stayed on the committee and I'm still involved. I'm not running it on a day-to-day basis anymore, but really, really, really cool just to see how many people we've helped and how many people have got behind, investing in this event, participating in this event. People come in from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, to play in the event. So that's really gratifying to me to give something back to society besides just, trying to earn money for yourself and your family.
That's amazing. How do people get involved with the tournament?
We have a committee every year, and anybody that wants to serve on the committee, all we ask of them is, to show up at a half dozen meetings and be willing to, recruit a couple of foursomes and maybe some auction items. And, some people do more than others, but, when you have an active group and good leadership, it's just really cool to see it come. This past year, we had 96 foursomes across 2 golf courses. We, like I said, raised $1.3 million and still counting, because there's still some things coming in from it. And it's just really cool to see people coming together, having a good time and a fun time, and doing good for society.
This almost sounds like an afterthought, but I was going to say, are there any stories that you have about how your work made a difference in someone's life? We just went through some of that, but curious if there's any other.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a few. Matter of fact, I just talked to a young man who interned for us when he was a student at Kellogg. He went on to become a very successful executive, first at Google and then at Waze. And now he just took a job as a number 2, probably will be a number 1 at a major company. And he just called me this week to pick my brain on some things and asked me to help him out with a few things and maybe potentially even joining his board. And, to see this, person who was probably in his mid to late 20s when he started with me, and to now be a super successful, built a nice family, and I can repeat that story 20 times over of other people. This is one that just happened to connect with him in the last day or two, and it's just really cool. And I think he said to me many times, and not looking for a pat on the back, but I really got a ton from what you taught me and what I learned from being at your firm, and and we've stayed friends and friendly, and it's kind of cool.
Love that. Got one last question for you. Would you attribute your success more to skill or luck?
I think it's all a combination. I mean, I don't think anybody will outwork me. I'm still a lunatic working 70, 80 hours a week, and but I don't consider it work. I love what I do. So I think you make your own breaks, but I think timing absolutely comes into it. You could be the smartest person in the world, the greatest instincts in the world, and if the market's terrible, and sometimes you can't overcome that. And you can also, I'll never forget, and it's a good story, I'll try not to give away who it is, but early in my career, I was at a National Venture Capital Association convention, and I happened to be sitting at a table next to one of the biggest luminaries probably in the history of venture capital. And I was asking him a very similar question. And he said, anybody that tells you there's not luck involved is not being honest with you. And he told me this story about how he grew up in northern Michigan and used to like to fish. And he used a certain kind of fishing lure. And fast forward, whatever, 20, 30 years later, some company comes to him and says they want to create an online, auction sales platform. And he kind of liked the idea and wasn't, not sure. And one night he happened to be fooling around on his computer and looked on their site and looked for this fishing lure that he as a kid used and loved, and he happened to find it on there. And he said that's kind of what pushed him over the edge to make the investment in that company, which ended up, I think, returning about 140x on invested capital. And so that's just almost too hard to believe, because he found a fishing lure on this site. That's what maybe caused him to say yes instead of no to an investment opportunity. So there's lots of stories like that from people. I'll tell you one other one that I'd love to tell. We had a company come in and pitch us 20-ish years ago, one of my early funds, and the 4 guys that came in were so boring they almost put us to sleep, and it was hard for us to keep our heads open. But they were experienced guys, knew their industry, knew their space, and they were going to repeat something they had done before. And we were on the fence of whether we should make the investment, because we said, "Oh my God, these guys are so boring. Like, are we going to want to be around these guys for 5 years?" And we ended up deciding to make the investment. They are one of the few companies I've ever experienced that never needed to raise more money, never missed a quarter, just up, 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 up. Sold the business. We made 24 times our money, and we hardly ever had to do any. We're super hands-on with our companies. We hardly had to do anything. We hardly had to. It was just so like that was luck too. Like we could have just as easily said, these guys are kind of boring. We're not going to invest in that. And it turned out to be one of, our better deals ever, and didn't have to do much. And we weren't a big part in the success. And a lot of other companies, we've been a huge part in the success and had to do a lot. So, you just never know.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I'm all done with questions. I will absolutely have you back on here. Your stories are fascinating, and I know that there's a lot more that you have to share. So I hope that you will join me again. And I hope when I go into Chicago next, I'll be able to meet you, because that would be great.
That'd be my pleasure. I love doing this kind of stuff, and it's you don't often put your thoughts down or communicate, but when you ask questions, it brings back a lot of memories, good, bad, and otherwise. And so I enjoyed the conversation.
That's great. Well, we'll definitely be doing this again. Any final thoughts?
Kind of what I said earlier, for people listening that are thinking about, leaving corporate America or pursuing their passion, or young people getting out of school, deciding what they want to do. Just like follow your passions. Don't give up. If you get no 20 times, that 21st time you might get a yes. I always get questions from people like, how do I break into the venture capital business? Because we get hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes, and everyone's Harvard, Yale, played 6 sports, speaks 5 languages, traveled the world. It's like, and they're like, how do I compete with that? How do I? But where there's a will, there's a way. So I'd say don't give up on what you really want to do, and don't be afraid to take a risk.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining, and for anybody that wants to learn more, go to kbpartners.com.